Today is May 30th, and we are talking with Dr. Jean Hofve today about cat constipation. Dr. Jean, thanks again for doing another podcast interview with us.
My pleasure.
So,
it's about my favorite subject, cat
I know.
poop.
Everybody loves cat poop.
Well, every cat's got some.
Yes. Well, I went ahead and read the article on Little Big Cat about constipated cats that you wrote to kind of get some ideas for the interview, and I loved the Bristol stool chart.
Yeah, I found that a number of years ago, and I thought that was the greatest thing since sliced bread.
Yeah.
No, it's and you know, have you ever watched Dr. Oz? Dr. Oz would say the exact same thing.
That's what I was going to tell you. It reminded me of Dr. Oz.
I know, me and Dr. Oz, we're on the same page.
Yes. Yeah, because ever since Dr. Oz started talking about you want your stool to look like your intestines, you know, you want the S shape. I mean, I first heard about it on Oprah, and then when Dr. Oz was on Oprah, and then saw it on Dr. Oz. Like that's my goal for my own stool now. More than anybody wanted to know, but that Bristol stool chart is like that.
He talks about the S shape, but the S shape only occurs because the toilet bowl will put it in an S shape. So type 4 on the Bristol stool chart is what, you know, if your pet is piling that up in a, like, it might not be an S shape, but you can see that it could be made into an S shape if it had gone into a container that shape. So
yes.
It's pliable.
Yes.
And not, you wouldn't have, I have one cat, I had a friend over the other day, we were working on the computer, and Puzzle, her box is in the office, and she gets all 4 feet in the box, so she has no expectation that her ass isn't in the box. So, but her ass is hanging over the edge of the box, so she just poops out on the mat. And we both looked incredulously at this thing. It looked like it came out of a German Shepherd. It was definitely type 3, but it was soft. It was huge. We laughed for half an hour about that.
That's hilarious.
But she avoids the box most times because if the boys hear her in the box, they will come in and bug her. So she kind of waits till the last possible second. But she does a bang up job.
Oh. Okay, so I guess what's one of the leading causes of constipation in cats?
Well, I would say dry food.
Okay.
And closely related would be lack of exercise.
Okay.
You know, between a sedentary cat eating as much as it wants, 24/7 of dehydrating food, yeah, you're going to have a problem sooner or later. Now, I just talked to someone else about this the other day, and he said, well, isn't this a problem of older cats? And yeah, it is. It is mostly older cats, but I remember seeing a cat, cute little guy, little tabby and white, and when we went to neuter him at 6 months, his exam was normal, except he had a lot of stool in his colon, which, you know, I didn't have a reason to suspect it. We went ahead with the surgery. He did fine. But I mentioned to the mom, you know, he's got a ton of stool in there, and I want you to pay attention. And sure enough, he turned out to be chronically constipated the rest of his life. There was something wrong with his nerves or his muscles or something, and it manifested itself when he was 6 months old. So it's not only older cats, and it's not always only dry food cats. Since I published this article about 10 years ago, I've heard from exactly 3 people who say that their cats have always been on a wet diet and became constipated anyway. But that's 3 out of, you know,
what does it mean when a cat is constipated? In other words, like, what are the consequences that, or the dangers involved?
Well, it's uncomfortable for the cat.
Okay.
And if the cat gets constipated enough, they'll stop eating. They, there's, the old saying, garbage in, garbage out.
Right.
Well, if there's no garbage coming out, they start feeling full and they feel nauseous and they won't eat. So now you have, the ingredients to a real crisis, because if they don't eat, they could develop hepatic lipidosis and all kinds of other stuff. And if the stool gets really compacted up in there, constipated or worse, obstipated, which is the next level of bad constipation, then you start damaging the colon. You can actually start tearing the muscle fibers, and you can start damaging the nerve endings, and eventually you'll come up with a condition called megacolon, which is severe intractable constipation. And these guys, and they can have unbelievable amounts of poop backed up in there. That is a surgical emergency. And with megacolon, you're likely not to ever get that function back. The only solution for that is surgery. Fortunately, surgery works very well, but it's why let it get to that point? It's fairly, I wouldn't say it's easy to manage constipation, but it is manageable. And there's no reason for it to ever get to the point where it's going to cause physical damage to the inside of the colon.
Okay.
Not to mention the pain. My sister, now I hope she doesn't ever listen to this, but she's chronically constipated. Of course, she drinks milk like a big dog, which will guarantee, in my mind, guarantees constipation. I have completely the opposite problem. But, it is strongly dietary related. And, she tells me how miserable she is. And it is really awful. She's crampy. She's bloated. She just feels terrible. And, you wouldn't want to wish that on a cat. Yeah. And they can't tell you. They can't email you and say, hey, I'm feeling kind of stopped up here. They don't know what to do. They only have the limited repertoire of behaviors, which is, they go in the box and they strain, right, and nothing happens, and then they give up, and then they go back in a little while. So if you're paying any attention at all, and if you're scooping the box daily like you ought to be, it should not take you very long to figure out that there's a problem.
Yeah.
There's not enough stool in the box, or the stool that's in the box is hard as a rock and teeny tiny and black and dried up, and those are not normal. Think of Dr. Oz.
Yeah.
Go for the sausage. I'm really glad he's on our side, don't you think?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
so, and some of these cats, sometimes the only symptom will be vomiting, because they eat and there's no place for the food to go, so it comes right back. But, it's, a lot of people are getting into this automatic kitty boxes, the genie that rinses it away and the litter maid that scoops it out and all that. Part of your job as a pet parent is to keep track of that. You should look at it every day and see what it's like, and you should know what normal is, and you should be able to tell what's not normal.
Yeah.
Anytime things change, appetite changes, stool quality, consistency, or amount changes, urine amount changes, drinking changes, eating changes, vomiting changes. Anytime you're seeing changes that are associated with the GI system, those can take you down a bad road real fast. So it's definitely time to call your vet.
Okay. And you had mentioned in your article on Little Big Cat, and I'll provide a link if somebody's listening to this on the website, but that sometimes that's one of the reasons why cats are defecating outside the litter box, which seems to be a common problem I've found with people, that they say that they'll pee in the litter box, but that they always go number 2 outside the litter box.
Yes, and so that's why the behaviorists say 1 box per cat plus 1. So if you have 1 cat, you should have 2 litter boxes, because there are a lot of cats who prefer to pee in one and poop in the other. They just, there's kind of different functions in the cat's eyes, and you can get territorial marking with either urine or feces.
Okay.
You can get all kinds of fuss budgety, or you get somebody like Puzzle, who, my other older cats, Spirit and Chinook used to do that also. They would get in or near the box and say, oh yeah, good enough, and let loose. So, you want to try and accommodate those cats. Sometimes it's a condition of the box that they're holding it for some reason, like I hold it if I go to Carter Lake in the summer, because I ain't going in that outhouse. Right? So if the box isn't clean enough, they will hold it. If the box is not the right texture or consistency or placement or configuration, they will hold it, and no longer. As well as I can, if you really have to hold it, you will.
Oh, yeah.
And they will hold it until they get into real trouble. So you don't want the cat, you want them to be pooping daily, and it should look similar, and it should be fairly regular. Sometimes you get a twice-a-day kitty, or every other day, like Puzzle, because she does hold it. When she goes, she really goes. I don't have any doubt at all that she has emptied herself out completely when I see that. So, it's a matter of paying attention and taking action before things go on too long, because these are very tender tissues. The muscular power in the colon is phenomenal, but it's still the same mucous membrane that lines your mouth and your eyes and everywhere else in your GI tract. You can hurt that stuff real easy.
Yeah. So, do you think that, I guess this is going to be a hard question to answer because there's so many factors involved, but if a cat is fed the same diet basically its whole life, then you can pretty much guarantee that how many times it defecates as a kitten will be kind of consistent with, in other words, if it's once a day as a 1-year-old, it should be once a day as a 5-year-old type thing?
Well, I think kittens go more often because they're smaller and there's less room in there.
Okay.
And to take the bull by the horns right off, don't ever feed the same diet to your cat its whole life.
Right.
That's dumb. Because what if one day that diet becomes unsuitable and you have a cat that's 100% addicted to it, does not recognize anything else on the planet as food, then you have a real problem.
Yes. I poorly phrased that question for sure.
Yeah, and what I have found, since I work from home and I'm home most of the time, I find that their appetite actually varies a lot. So one day they're hungrier than the next day. I go through periods where they'll eat 2 humongous meals a day, every day for a week or 2, and then all of a sudden none of them are interested in breakfast. They're barely interested in lunch. It's like they catch up, and then cats are sensitive to their own needs, and they know when they need to take a break. So one day, unfortunately, most of mine are on the same schedule, similar biorhythms, I guess. I got 2 pairs of siblings, but we don't eat the same thing every day. We don't eat the same amount every day. We don't, some days we feel like Mexican, some days we feel like Italian, some days we feel like a bologna sandwich would just be the best thing in the world. It's variety. variety. There's variety. And I wish people could understand that, whatever it says on the bag or box or can or whatever, that's an estimate. It's a general rule of thumb, and not every cat, in fact, very few cats will actually be zeroed in on with that amount. It's most animals will need a little more and a little less. They'll need a little more if it's windy because they're burning more energy because they're nervous up, or if there's an earthquake or the house next door is constructing. Their appetite will vary with weather and conditions. Say you're planning a party and they get all anxious and upset and they don't eat. Well, if you don't eat, then nothing's coming out the other end. So you need to kind of, as the owner, as the guardian, it's your job to keep track of what's going in, make sure an appropriate amount is coming out in an appropriate time frame. And the only way you'll know that is to pay attention. If and I literally have had clients that kept a diary. Bongo ate 2 kibbles at 11:45, and then he ate 6 kibbles at 11:48.
Wow.
You don't have to be like that, but you should have a general idea of what's going in, what's coming out, and you should have a general idea of what's normal, so that if things change, you can accommodate that. And some days your cat's going to be hungrier, and some days your cat's not going to be as hungry.
Yeah.
That's perfectly normal.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. Because Charlie and Trig, I struggle like every other cat owner does with cat food brands and flavors and all that kind of stuff because, like you said, some days they feel like Mexican, some days they feel like Chinese. And so I'm constantly trying new flavors to see if, it's a hit or whatever. So as a result, I'm also watching the litter box to make sure we're not making diarrhea, because then that, it gets stuck on their fur and then it gets on my bed or wherever they're laying, and I don't want that kind of stuff. So I definitely watch it like a hawk.
Yeah, but it is a really good thing. What you're doing is to try different things all the time and then pay attention to how it works. If I had a nickel for every time someone, thought, hang on, somebody wants to go for a walk. Let's see, where was I? Oh, if you're feeding a variety, if you're constantly feeding a variety, which is kind of an oxymoron, but you should, like my cats don't ever get the same meal twice. They get raw food, they get canned food, they get this, they get that, they get the other thing. I make home-make food for them. Even if they're getting canned food, they get their supplements with it. But I like to buy a large variety of flavors and brands. Boy, I had a call from a friend who has a cat rescue, and they had been getting a good deal on food for wellness. And so their entire, flock of kitties, all of the rescue kitties, and there were a lot of them, 50 cats or something, they were eating only wellness. And then there was the wellness recall for thiamine deficiency. And they had a lot of cats get sick, and they had a lot of cats die. So if you're feeding one brand and one flavor only, you are walking on the sharp edge of a recall at any time. I mean, look at the foods that have been recalled in the last month.
Yeah.
It's dozens and dozens of foods. So, it's good to feed a variety because you protect your kitty from those kinds of excesses and deficiencies. You prevent finicky behavior. You prevent food addictions. You prevent inflammatory bowel disease. It's so important to give them a variety. Yeah. But you do have to watch how they respond. few days of the same leftovers, I don't want any more either.
Right.
It's it's not that hard to have a cat if you're paying attention and relating to them. If you're doing that to even the least extent, you're gonna be fine.
Right. When my cat Rags was going through chronic renal failure, one of the consequences of that was constipation, because obviously his kidneys weren't helping him.
Right, they're not retaining the water, so they're getting dehydrated, and the colon tries to rehydrate, but if there just isn't enough fluid, it's not going to happen.
Right.
They're losing so much fluid that everything is going to be dried out, including the poop.
Yeah. So one of the things that I wanted to ask you about in this interview was, how do you treat cats with constipation? And I guess, we've covered that kind of with healthy cats, but can you talk about, I guess, diseases like chronic renal failure that cause constipation and how to deal with that in that sense?
Well, yeah, I mean, the diseases that will dehydrate you are chronic renal failure, diabetes, hyperthyroidism, because it often causes vomiting and diarrhea, and if they're not keeping up with their fluid intake, then you're going to dry things up. So any kind of thing that causes dehydration, and there's a big pile of things that do, because of course the first thing that happens when a cat feels sick is they stop eating, and if they're getting wet food, then they're also not getting that water. So
right.
Things can go downhill real fast.
Okay. So, my vet recommended Inulose, and that was a disaster, so we did probiotics, and that worked. Have you heard what things have worked for patients of yours?
Well, here's what you'll get. If you go to a normal vet, your average vet, and you say, I think my cat is constipated, they palpate the cat, they say, oh yeah, there's a lot of stool in the colon. They will put your cat on a high fiber diet, because fiber modulates the passage of stool through the feces. If it's too fast, it'll slow it down. If it's too slow, it'll speed it up, in theory. And usually those work.
Okay.
For a little while.
Right.
And then they stop working. And then you are worse off than you were before, because now your cat's really dehydrated, and he's got buckets of fiber now stuck in the colon, and you're going to be way worse off than you would have been had you gone in another direction. Now, when high fiber diets stop working, then vets tend to put them on a low residue diet, which means virtually no fiber. Well, come on, people. This is a shades of gray kind of world.
Yeah.
What I do for constipated cats is immediately I give them fluid. And if it's been a chronic problem, I teach the parents how to give fluids at home, because that's the easiest thing, and they need the fluids at that point. Now, if they're very constipated to obstipated, they're going to need more than fluids. One of my favorite tricks, believe it or not, is Vaseline.
Oh.
Vaseline is just grand for this sort of thing, and everybody is going to go, oh my God, you're feeding petroleum products to the cat, oh my God. Well, let me tell you the story of my cat Spirit, who loved Vaseline, and she ate Vaseline 2 or 3 or 4 or more times a day, every day, for 20 and a half years.
Wow.
Clearly did not cause her a problem.
Yeah.
And the thing about a petroleum product like petroleum jelly, it's a very, very big molecule, and it basically inert in the body. The body can't break it down. You don't have any Vaseline enzymes sitting in your pancreas. It's not possible to break it down. Now people say, well, if all you want is to grease up the food, why can't we give vegetable oil or butter or something? Because they'll get digested, and they will not complete the job. What you want is for whatever you're giving to grease up the food, the ball of food that's in there, and slide it all the way. Well, if the coating gets digested, now you're left with a big wad of food 2/3 of the way down the GI tract with nothing to escort it anymore. So that's why I like Vaseline, is because it escorts it all the way out. It's a grand thing. And, Petramol and Cadillacs and Laxatone, those are all basically Vaseline or mineral oil with flavor. I don't like those flavors. My cats have never liked those flavors. I give them plain Vaseline. Some of them like it, some of them don't, but it works real good.
Okay, so what
I
amount?
If they have a problem, then I just give them a big wad of Vaseline in the corner of their mouth. And that will usually take care of hairballs and most other things pretty quickly.
Yeah, I've heard about Vaseline for hairballs, but not for constipation, but it makes sense.
Yeah, well, especially because it warms up inside the cat, and it's nice and gooey, and it flows, and it'll just slide right on out to the colon, and it'll coat what's in there and help get it out. It doesn't work all the time. If your cat's really constipated, it's not going to be enough.
Yeah.
But it's a great thing to try at first, and it is not going to hurt your cat.
Right.
Well, the other things you want are, you want more moisture in the cat, because if the stool stays moist enough, you're never going to have this problem. So canned food, raw food, homemade food, something high moisture. I really like water fountains to get the cats to drink more. My cats all abandon the sink, which, when you go in the bathroom and you turn on the water and you have 4 or 5 cats immediately trying to get to the faucet, that's really annoying.
Yeah.
So I got them a fountain, and it totally took care of the problem. They quit bugging me, and I could control and see how much they were drinking and all that. So fountains are great. Then you get into the tougher stuff. Now, slippery elm is really nice. A lot of cats do real well with slippery elm because it also forms like a mucilaginous gel that will make this poop slipperier, and it's also got a lot of fiber in it. So it's pretty good for not severe constipation. It's a nice thing to try. If you're going to put slippery elm bark in your cat's food, you must add water, and usually cold water, because slippery elm itself is like a sponge, and it'll absorb the water out of the food, and then you have a food ball going through the GI tract that's actually drier than it would have been to begin with because of the slippery elm. So you have to make up for the water that's going to take. So it's water balance and what kind of food and fibers to some extent. The other couple of non-medical solutions are exercise and weight loss, because 90% of these cats are obese, and our guts don't work too good if we're not exercising. So it just stands to reason. I mean, cats normally in the real world would be very active. They would be getting a lot of exercise as they're trying to get to their food, and they're hunting, and they're doing all their cat things and patrolling and climbing and checking things out. Cats are moving around all the time.
Yeah.
So if your cat is a couch potato, you want to exercise them, and for that I recommend play therapy. We have an article about it on littlebigcat.com, and play therapy is a very specific ritualized structured play session, and it's really, really good for your cat. Stress management, in case you have a cat like Puzzle that avoids the box because of territorial issues, then stress management. They get Bach flower remedies. They get homeopathic remedies. They get a product called ASEA. They get all kinds of things that I feel are relieving stress and creating better health for them.
Yeah.
The other thing we have to remember is sometimes constipation isn't due to a GI problem at all, but it's due to pain. So making sure that your cat is not in pain, doesn't have a disc out, or has had some kind of injury or something, a short course of some kind of painkiller, non-opioid painkiller, because of course opiates cause constipation. So there's Metacam or something, low dose for a few days, just to make sure that isn't a factor.
Okay.
There's, then we go. The rest of the treatments are more medical in nature. The Miralax or lactulose or stool softeners or Cisapride, which has been taken off the human market because it has dangerous side effects, but cats aren't prone to those side effects. They do real well with it. The drug name when it was available was Propulsid, but now it's called Cisapride, is the generic, and you can get it from a compounding pharmacy. Your vet can call it in anywhere. Pediatric suppositories, those sometimes work if you can get your cat to tolerate it. Enemas for when it's too late for all the minor interventions. Some people give enemas at home. I've given plenty of enemas to cats in the clinic. If the enema doesn't work, then you may have to have what we politely call a dig out, which is under anesthesia. The tech, usually not the vet, this is usually going to be your favorite tech, so bring them cookies, will go in there with their fingers and pull the poop out. And they have to basically milk it down the colon, out into the pelvic inlet, where they can hook it with a finger and pull it out.
Yeah.
It's a very unpleasant procedure for everyone concerned. Really try to get it solved before you have to go there.
Yeah.
And for the cats that are too far gone, there's surgery. They do what they call a subtotal colectomy. Colectomy means removing the colon, and they don't remove the whole thing, but they remove the damaged part, which is often a great portion of it. And then your problem will be diarrhea.
Yeah.
But the cat will be more comfortable, and eventually the small intestine will start to take on some of the functions of the colon, and it'll make it, the cat will regain control, and it'll be a much better situation altogether. But the recovery's not fun, and it's dangerous.
Yeah.
But it's, people are very, very happy with the results overall, because the cats that need this, they really need it. They're in such terrible trouble. And it's so hard to watch a cat go through that. It's just not fair.
Yeah.
So, but there's a lot of things to do before it comes to that. And, prevention is way better than treatment, of course.
Yes. Yes. I mean, I assume if it goes untreated, then the cat will die.
Yeah, and it will be a really ugly, painful, and unpleasant death.
Right.
This is kind of related to the urinary thing when a boy cat gets blocked.
Yeah.
It turns out that most people, if you're not monitoring the box and you don't see that there's a problem, and the cat goes far enough, then the chances of it dying on the operating table are very high. And I think a fair amount of cats just disappear and never come home, and you think, oh, they got eaten by a coyote or got locked in a garage or something. They could have died from the toxins in the stool or the pee that get backed up into the blood, and they die of sepsis. And that is a very, very ugly way to die also.
Yeah.
So you want your cat to be indoors with a box that you can see what's going on, because they can't talk. They can't say, I got a tummy ache, dag nabbit. They can't email you. They can't leave you a Post-it note. You have to be paying attention to their behavior, because their behavior is the only thing that's going to tell you how they feel.
Right. I agree. In preparation for this interview, I asked on Facebook again, if anybody had any questions. And so one of the questions kind of correlates to what you just said. You have to be paying attention. And the reader asked, in a multi-cat household, how do you know if one of the cats are constipated?
You'll know from the behavior of that cat, because if it goes on more than a couple of days, that cat will stop eating.
Okay.
You know, or it'll start behaving, you know, it'll be lethargic or act painful, or if you try to pet his tummy, it'll bite you, you know. I have 4 cats. And I have 4 litter boxes, and I know who uses which one. I have a pretty general good idea about it. And if I see something unusual, I start watching the cats really closely. I start paying more attention. You know, it's not that hard to learn how to palpate your cat unless it's tremendously obese. I think that's, and tech should be teaching people at the belly.
Yeah.
Because a full bladder, a normal full bladder feels different from a blocked bladder, and a stool full of colon feels different than one that's normal. Normal stool feels different than abnormal stool, and these are all things we could be teaching people how to feel themselves.
Yeah.
I thought it would save so many trips to the vet, and it would, you know, and it would save animals so much trouble and pain and distress if people were more aware of how to feel them up, you know, so you can catch those problems early. You see something suspicious, you know, I see something suspicious, I go directly to Sundance and palpate his bladder.
Yeah.
Because he's the one that has a history. If I see horrible dry little stool, I go for Flynn, because he's the one that'll do that.
Yeah.
Because I've had these cats 10, 15 years, and I know what their patterns of behavior are. I know that Puzzle never uses the box in the bathroom, so if it's the box in the bathroom, then it must be one of the other 3.
Yeah.
You know, and if it's the box in the living room, it could be any of them. You know, it's pretty. If it's the box in the office, it won't be Sundance, because he doesn't use that box. So, you know, it's like if you have kids. If you have 4 kids, you know the traits of those children. You know their habits. You know who's the one that's most likely to be caught with the hand in the cookie jar. You know which one is the one that likes to climb things, is going to break his arm when he falls. You're going to know what their habits are, and you're going to be able to, you know, if you come home and find broken glass all over the place, you're going to have a pretty good idea which kids out of those 4 is going to be the most likely to be involved. So it's playing the odds, and it's knowing your animals. And the only way you get to know your animals is to pay attention and to really be involved in their lives. You know, unlike kids, you don't have to drive them to soccer practice, but you should be playing with them every day. You should be petting them every day. You should be kind of feeling them every day, and, you know, make the abdominal palpation a part of a massage. You know, I get cats in the clinic and I need to palpate their tummy. I just tell them, I'm going to give you a massage here, honey. And, you know, and dogs, same thing.
Yeah.
You know, you can rub around in that abdomen, and you find out right away if they're sensitive. If they're painful, they're going to pull away. They're going to react unpleasantly. They're going to look at you like you are out of your freaking mind. You know, it's just being involved in your cat's lives in the same way that you're involved in the rest of your family or your friends. You know what they're like normally, and so if they don't look right, you're going to know.
Right. Yeah.
This is not a problem that develops overnight.
Yeah.
This is something that you are going to have plenty of warning about, because if they don't go from normal stool on Tuesday to obstipated on Wednesday, that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
First, you're going to see that the stools are going to, you know, progress up the Bristol stool chart to drier, lumpier, part, it's more likely to be deer pellets than sheep, but you're gonna have plenty of warning. This is not something that doesn't tell you it's coming. So, it's just paying attention. Do the things that you know will prevent this problem as well as a host of other problems. Play therapy every day, that's going to eliminate almost every behavior problem you could imagine. It's going to reduce inter-cat aggression. It's going to get them exercise, which is going to reduce obesity and make all their systems, their urinary system, their respiratory system, their cardiac system, and their GI system, those are all going to work better. Their immune system's going to work better. Everything's going to work better if they're getting exercise and if they're getting an appropriate diet. These problems, pardon me while I climb upon my high horse, are mostly veterinarian caused. Okay. Because veterinarians don't educate people correctly, and they have not educated people that dry food is not appropriate for cats. And the longer you feed dry food, the more problems you're going to have, because then you're signing your cat up for obesity, arthritis, diabetes, constipation, kidney problems, urinary problems, bladder stones. That's what you sign up for when you feed your dog, when you feed your cat dry food. Those are just some of the things. Of course, arthritis, skin allergies, every kind of thing. So we have created this problem by not educating people, by promoting crap foods, and in crap I include all the expensive veterinary diets. If they're dry, they're no good. They're bad for your cat. I recently put an article up on my website called 10 Reasons Why Dry Food is Bad for Your Cat or Dog. I didn't have any trouble at all coming up with 10 reasons, and I could have gone on. So, we need to feed our animals a species-specific, species-appropriate diet. And with cats, that means wet food. Because, they don't eat mummified mice. They eat fresh prey that are full of water, and they're full of blood too. So all the nutrients that are in the blood that are absent in the meat that we buy, because animals that get slaughtered are bled out immediately. So because the blood, they can sell it for a bigger price somewhere else. So our animals are missing out on that. So what we need to do is try and build a better mouse, and it's not easy to do that. But wet food, raw food, homemade food. As long as you've got a good recipe and you've got a reputable manufacturer, a high moisture diet is what cats are supposed to eat. And if they eat that, they will be less prone to every health problem. You're not going to 100% eliminate it. I've had cats eating 100% wet diet that have developed urinary problems and blocked. Yeah. It happens. But it doesn't happen nearly as often as it happens to cats eating dry food. So, that's the dry food thing just makes me nuts, and it saddens me to see dry food spreading around the entire world now. Japan is starting to feed their pets dry food, and China, and Argentina, and Brazil, and South Africa. And we're just not doing good by our cats. Yeah. But those are very lucrative markets for the pet food makers. And pet food makers always promote dry food over wet food because they make a boatload more money. The ingredients are much cheaper. The processing is much cheaper. The storage is much cheaper. Transportation is much cheaper. They would rather everybody feed dry food. Yeah. Because canned food's a pain in the butt to make. You have to pay for the metal cans. You have to pay for the liners of the metal cans. It's heavier to ship, and it's mostly water, so you're paying to ship water. And it's expensive for people to buy. But do you want to invest in your cat's health now by feeding what it should eat with the right kinds of food, or do you want to pay, for a dig-out procedure or a septocolectomy or a bladder stone removal or insulin for the rest of the cat's life. Is that what you'd rather do? You want to pay for cheap food now, but you're going to pay thousands in vet bills later?
Right.
And please, please, please invest in your cat now with a good diet and head these problems off.
Yeah.
That's my big thing I got to say.
I posted something on Facebook yesterday that Ingrid at the Conscious Cat had written about dry food or the importance of wet food, something like that. And one of the Floppycats readers said, this is such BS. I worked at a vet, and all we saw with cats that were on wet food was rotten teeth.
Hey, I've seen tens of thousands of cats with rotten teeth that never saw wet food.
Yeah.
The rotten teeth thing, that is such BS, and it is a genetic. It's all genetic.
Yeah.
It's very little to do with diet.
That's good to know about genetic, because, my two cats are obviously on the same thing, but Charlie has 10 times the amount of tartar than Trig does. And it's just, so I figured it was genetic, and I want Charlie to get Trig's genes for that.
Yeah. And it can be environmental. I mean, I had one family of cats. They had, they were lovely people. I loved them to death. But they had like 16 cats, and I took all the teeth out of most of their cats. And it's, but I think they had an endemic calicivirus that was, the cats had just passed around. And so, it was an environmental trigger. But, I was amazed when I realized that red-headed cats had less tartar and more gingivitis. Well, redheads tend to have more inflammation, and that includes your red tabbies, your Abyssinians, very few of whom have any teeth at all by the time they're 4 years old. Your calicos, your torties. Any cat with red in it is more likely to be have a genetic propensity to create inflammation as opposed to other kinds of physical reactions.
Yeah. That's interesting.
So,
okay, so another question was, and I don't know if you can answer this, but what does it mean when your cat's litter box smells like mothballs?
Well, that would not be good. First, I would clean the litter box. And if you're using mothballs to fill the litter box, you might want to stop that. They're little pellets, but they're not really suitable because they're incredibly toxic. That could be diabetes because there's the acetone in the urine could smell vaguely like mothballs. But I'd have that checked out.
Okay. Somebody asked, is it true that if you feed them grain-free food, their poop doesn't smell as bad as it's supposed to?
No. Grain-free food, if it's dry, is worse on every count for your cat. It is more dehydrating because protein is a diuretic. Okay. So I think the grain-free foods are stupid. Grains are very rare allergens, and the grain-free foods typically simply substitute sugary, starchy vegetables like green peas or white potatoes or sweet potatoes. It's not like they're less carbs, and the point is we want less carbs. Some of the grain-free foods are higher protein. There's still some carbs in there, and they just pull the water right out of your cat. I am really not happy about that. Grain-free canned food, if you want to go there, that's fine, but there's not that much carb in any wet food. And in fact, the cat food with the lowest amount of carbs is Fancy Feast. So there you go. Fancy Feast, good diet for diabetic cats because it's got most of their flavors have about 8%
Okay. What about getting rid of your cat's runs? So like the opposite of constipation. What could that be?
Well, there are about 4,000 different causes for diarrhea.
Okay.
One of them, interestingly enough, is constipation. And I proved this to myself once. I got obstipated, but I had diarrhea because the only thing that was getting past the blockage was the liquid stuff.
Oh.
So, I swear, I promise, I am working on a book. I've said for the last couple of years, the next book I write is going to be about cat poop. And I really have to do it because there's so much people don't understand about cat poop. And every time you get a group of cat people together, eventually your conversation is going to devolve to cat poop. I've seen it a million times. So, and especially if you get a group of veterinarians, then the talk will always turn to cat poop and abscesses because those will clear a restaurant out faster than anything else.
Yeah.
And we have it all to ourselves.
Yes. Okay, and somebody asked this, but we kind of already covered it with the Bristol stool chart, but what's a normal ideal one supposed to look like? Can you describe it in case someone can't see it visually while listening to this? Please.
Yeah, let's see. It should be about the consistency of like silly putty or Play-Doh, soft, moist, moldable, like it, if the cat poops in the corner of the box, it's going to stack up and tip over, and it's pliable.
Okay.
It's not rock hard. It should look fairly moist all over, and be a nice long string of it. And it should be round, around in diameter,
Okay.
and but not too thin. Because I'm thinking of, sometimes I've seen stools that are this shape. They're the correct shape, but they're a quarter of an inch wide. It'll just be a long string of this really soft, gooey stuff. It should be able to hold its shape. Like if you're going to scoop it with the scooper,
Yeah.
just nudge the end of it and see how easily it moves. Can you fold it in half with your scooper thing? You should be able to. I mean, it'll break.
Yeah.
Fold it over completely, but you should be able to manipulate it, and it shouldn't fall apart right away or, melt or anything like that. So, this Bristol stool chart, I was so thrilled. I wish I'd had this when I was in practice.
Yeah. You can put it next to that chart where you can how to tell if your cat's fat or skinny too.
Exactly. Because they're very closely related.
Yes. That's funny.
It's if you watch Dr. Oz, your cat's stool should look the same as what Dr. Oz discusses.
Right.
And it should, when your cat pushes it out, this is another really important point, is the anal glands on either side of the anus, the correct consistency of stool that's good size around, so the anus has to expand, it has to stretch out for the stool to pass through. That is supposed to naturally empty the anal glands on the surface of the poop.
Okay.
That is the marking behavior. That, the anal gland juice is what makes poop smell so good, and it tells the story for other animals who then come and sniff it. It's a marking behavior. So if the stool is too thin and soft, or too big and hard, or it's pellets or something, long as they're not acting like they're at death's door, I don't worry about that.
Yeah.
But abnormal stool plus another symptom like lethargy or vomiting or fever, that is a veterinary visit right there. If it's just the stools, you've been changing the food and the stool consistency has been kind of wandering around, well, yeah. If you change foods too abruptly, you will get diarrhea, and definitely probiotics will take care of that.
Okay.
So, now I have another article on a little big cat called Switching Foods.
Okay.
And so for the people who have cats with this type of problem, you don't want to switch the diet too fast. If they're not used to eating a variety of things already, then you want to introduce the new food very gradually. And cats, of course, are notorious about not wanting to change food. So the Switching Foods article tells all why you should switch and how you should switch. And it has in it every tip and trick that I've ever heard of for getting a cat to eat a new food.
Okay. I just found it, so I'll include a link to that as well.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, because I've known cats, and cats are stubborn. Oh, Lordy, they are stubborn.
Yeah.
And if they've only ever eaten dry food, they will not understand that wet food is food. They won't recognize it as food, and they won't touch it. So you have to, there's tricks that you have to go through. And I have seen the problem that most people run into is just like the same problem when you introduce new cats and stuff. You go too fast.
Yeah.
It's up to the cat to determine how fast it goes. And I have literally seen it take 2 years to convert a cat to a wet diet.
Oh, that's good to know.
If you've been working on it for 2 weeks, get a grip, because it could be a lot longer. It's the cat's choice how fast to change, not you. Okay. You're not going to tell the cat what to eat, because cats will starve themselves to death. If you put food down that they don't want, they won't eat it.
Yeah.
And they will not eat it until they're at death's door. They really will. I have seen cats literally try to starve themselves to death.
Yeah.
They are that stubborn, and they are that set in their ways, and they are that into this is food and nothing else is food. Mm-hmm. Or this is the food I like and I don't like anything else. I ever know any kids like that? My niece once decreed that she wasn't going to eat any green food. Well, there's a lot of foods that are green.
Yeah.
She just didn't happen to like any of them. Well, I don't like vegetables either, but I eat them.
Now, see, the smart ass in me, if I were her mom, would get green food coloring and put it in everything.
Yeah, Joyce, you need to lose a couple pounds. There you go.
Yeah. Well, that's good to know about. It could take up to 2 years, because I just had a reader in Australia tell me today on Facebook that she can't get her cat to switch, and I'm like, keep trying, don't keep her on that dry food. So I'll tell her that.
If you want your cat to be healthy, you have to be persistent.
Yes.
If you don't care, then don't do it.
Yeah.
And there are people that don't care that much. The cat is just sort of an accessory. It's no better than a lamp or a stool.
Right.
And those are not the people that are listening to us, and those are not the people that are going to have healthy cats. I'm sorry, But the people that are paying attention, the people that want to do the best for their cats, those are the people that are listening to you and me, and we want to give them all the tools they can get to make sure that these things work out.
Yeah, I agree. In fact, one of my consistent readers on Floppycats, when I asked, does anyone have any questions about constipation, she was like, not anymore. Thanks to your wonderful advice and switching to all wet food, her cat has no pooping issues anymore. So that really made me feel good, because sometimes it's hard to push something so hard, especially when it seems to be of an inconvenience. But I keep saying it's prevention So.
Yeah. And you know what they say about prevention?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I would much rather, you know, all my cats I started with as kittens. 2 of them were 8 weeks old, and 2 of them were 2 weeks old. I really had a good shot with the very young kittens. They were orphans from a feral mother, but you know, I started them on raw food when they were 3 weeks old. I started them, you know, I did everything from the get-go that I knew how to do. You know, and I expect them to live very long, healthy lives. So, you know, because I set them up from the time they were tiny to do as good as they could possibly do.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and I still have vet bills. You know, I still have to get the long hair shaved. I still have to clean their teeth every year. You know, I still have to do kind of preventive maintenance. Like, you know, like today I need to take my car in for an oil change. Well, you know, if I don't, boy, what kind of prevention is that? That's if I don't change the oil in my car, my engine's going to seize and I won't have a car. So,
right.
You know, that would be a bad lesson to learn. So don't learn the lesson and harm your cat with it.
Right. Well, and most people can relate that somebody along the lines has had one of the issues that you've talked about here. That is a warning sign that they, you know, are subject to constipation. So it makes sense to me.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like anything. It's not, you know, having a cat is a responsibility. If you choose to bring a cat into your life, you are assuming responsibility for it. So it's not okay to treat it like a lamp. You know, oh, the light bulb's burned out, I'll put in a new light bulb. You know, that's not enough. This is a living, breathing animal that is 100% dependent. It's your responsibility to do the best by that cat.
I agree. Well, those are all the questions that I had. Is there anything that I should have asked you that I didn't?
Oh, let me look here. See if I see any other. I think, you know, in this article I really put in everything I could think of.
On the constipation article? Your Constipated Cats article?
Yeah. You know, this is the #1 searched article on it's our #1 search term on Little Big Cat.
Is it really?
More people find Little Big Cat through this article than anything else.
Wow.
And you know, we have 250 something articles on this website. That is the #1 search term.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well.
So that tells me that there are a lot of people that are having this problem with their cats.
Yeah.
You know, and the things that the veterinarians are doing aren't working. Well, yeah, because they're just putting them on a high-fiber diet. If they put them on a high-fiber diet and that stops working, then they're kind of out of ideas already.
Yeah.
You know, then you start getting into some pretty heavy drugs and surgery, and it's not. You should never have to get to that point, really.
Yeah.
If you're paying attention and you catch it early, this is a very solvable problem. It's not that it's easy to solve, because sometimes it isn't, but boy, oh boy. Mm-hmm. You know, this is really the place where you can make a huge difference in your cat's health and well-being and comfort. And your annoyance levels as well.
Yeah, I mean, as a human, if you've ever been constipated, then you know how uncomfortable it is, and yeah, I agree.
Yeah. And you know, the stress management, the flower essences, those can really help, because if there's emotional issues around pooping for the has ever been ambushed by another cat, or you know, but and then you have to think of the whole litter box thing. Well, because if the cat doesn't like the litter box, they're going to hold their poop longer and will become more likely constipated. So you want to look at your litter box configuration and the type of litter and all those things around it. You know, there are a lot of complicated complicating factors that can play into this, but it's pretty straightforward to resolve it early. You know, there's just, you do this, you do that, you do the other thing. You know, you keep the box real clean, take the lid off if the cat doesn't like the lid, take the liner out if the cat doesn't like the liner, put multiple boxes if there's a conflict between cats, put them, and don't line them all up in the basement. There needs to be a box on every level of the house, because the choice of box and location is up to the cat. It is not going to work if you put it where you want it.
Right.
Some cats will go along with you, and many more will not. So, it's a whole thing. This is part of the whole environmental management and health and wellness program. So, but yeah, stop it before it goes too far. That's the best advice I can give you. Is take care of it right away.
Yes, I agree. Well, thank you so much again for another great interview. I love that we're helping the kitties by educating.